Hey, you're listening to Blindsight. Let's go. Mental health isn't something to take lightly. It's time to fight. It's time to thrive. Let's do this.
Welcome to Blindsight. This is your host, Bill Lundgren, and with co-host Jonathan Price. And we're glad to have you here listening in on this conversation. And today we're going to be talking about anxiety. Now, we talked about depression before, but it's important for us to also talk about and try to understand anxiety as it affects people. Because anxiety is, it's a throwback to cave person days and has helped, humans survive and still helps us survive, but it's one of those things we have to monitor. So anyway, Jonathan, welcome aboard.
Thanks, Bill. I'm having so much fun. I actually have a joke for you. You ready?
Yep. Okay.
All right. What did the British guy say to the three-headed lady?
I have no idea.
Hello, hello, hello.
Oh, jeez. Okay, and we go downhill from here.
There we go.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It was just right there. It was in one of those dad joke apps that my daughter found. And so she told it to me. And that's one of the few ones that I actually laughed out loud.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, doing great.
Okay. On with the show. But actually, one of the things I was aware of is when I was preparing for this show, how anxious I was to make this thing work.
Well, that's why I tell jokes, so that you don't become anxious.
Yeah, to break it up. Okay.
There we go.
Well, I'm speechless at this point, if you can believe it.
I threw you off the rails. We haven't even started the show and we're off the rails.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Oh dear. But anyway, back to work. Anxiety is really is different from depression, and physiologically it involves really a lot of racing heartbeat, sometimes even active sweating, a lot of fear of doing things. In general, is fear of doing things. Now, in today's world, we need to have the ability to feel some anxiety to kind of, if we go into a neighborhood we're unfamiliar with, or we're doing something new, there's going to be a certain amount of anxiety, which is an emotion, and all our emotions are good. They just have to be moderated. But the moderation is using our intelligence to figure out how do we protect ourselves against something that we're fearful of, but be able to do what we need to do. What happens for a lot of people is the anxiety and the stomach palpitations and so forth makes it difficult for them to do anything. That's what we call, for example, social phobia. That is, we're afraid to go to gatherings of people, partially based on the idea that we can't compete, or they're not going to like us, they're going to throw us out from wherever we're going, they're going to turn their backs to us. That's the image that we give ourselves, which results in the kind of nervousness that we have, because who wants to go through that? And so we end up staying at home, back to the social isolation we talked about recently, and we become fearful to do anything. And that can be any number of fears that we can have. They're given different names. For example, the various phobias that we can have, those are all anxiety reaction to the point where they become clinically significant. Now, what's this all about? Well, there's a lot of reasons that we have that kind of reaction. I'll give myself as an example. I came from a very anxious family. So I grew up believing that, things out there are pretty scary. And it took me a while to kind of calm down. What about you, Jonathan?
I haven't had a whole lot of anxious moments and that I would necessarily associate with anxiety per se. I think when I think about anxiety specifically, it's more of a anticipatory thing when it comes to a fear that's either known or unknown.
Yeah.
That's kind of like my own personal definition, because when I think about, maybe going on a long trip, and all of the logistics that are surrounding a long trip, I might get a little worked up or anxious about that.
Right.
Maybe it's a good anxious or a bad anxious, but it's the anticipatory nature of something that's about to happen. Now, those things may or may not come true, but that's still an anxious place to be.
And you see there are different levels of it. And the level we're talking a lot about is the level where the anticipation, whenever it occurs, immobilizes us.
Right.
And that's the severity. That's why I'm saying to people, there are some people who have absolutely no awareness of their emotional self.
Oh, yeah.
So they may not feel anxious. And they may not feel anything. Everything is logic, and they just say, well, I do this, this, and this. But we're a healthier situation is when we can be aware of some anxiety that we may have as a warning to us to pay attention to certain things. And then our intelligence says, okay, here's how I deal with it. Here's how I get past it. Or here's what I need to be aware of to give myself some protection. Going hiking in the woods by yourself, there may be rattlesnakes around. So you have to be kind of aware of that, but you also have to know what to do if you encounter a rattlesnake. It's that kind of thing. But when people become so afraid of taking a hike because they might run into a rattlesnake, that's when we're talking about their life being affected by their anxiety.
Right.
Now, for people with blindness, particularly if they're newly blind, it's got to be a lot of anxiety occurring because you're trying to figure out how to get around.
Yep.
In a new circumstance. And that's why this is an important thing for us to be paying attention to. Because I know, I have a combination of hearing loss and sight, total loss of sight, which means crossing the street or just even with my dog, I have to trust my dog to know what to do, but I think that's asking a dog a lot.
Right.
I have to be aware of what's going on, which means it's going to be a certain amount. I'm going to feel a certain amount of anxiety, but not enough that's going to keep me from doing something, unless it's talking about crossing a superhighway. That I would draw a line at, but that makes sense, right?
Yep.
So this is why I say some anxiety is useful. It's the moderation. Now, one of the things we're also coming to realize more and more that anxiety can be so high that you lose hope in being able to do anything. And that's when it starts to get the depression comes in with the anxiety. And, in fact, there's some suicidal risk. If you lose that hope that you can, in managing the situations that are making you anxious. That makes sense?
Yeah, it does. It's taking that anxiety to definitely a more internal level. But you were talking about people with blindness going through the anxiety, and the first thing that pops up to me is that either, it's kind of two things. Fear of dependence but then a fear of depending on somebody and then losing that independence that you had. I think there's two separate things, at least when you talk about that. But
Right.
like you said, there are so many different anxieties surrounding blindness and low vision people that just navigating that in and of itself can take a very long time. And really, in my mind, I would believe, or I would think, that experience would naturally alleviate some of those anxiety issues. What do you think?
Well, certainly, that's part of the, I'll call the treatment for anxiety. But I want to get back to to what you just said about, cutting back, becoming dependent. This is one of the difficulties for older people who develop macular degeneration when they come to a point where they can't drive. And somebody who's been independent, able to drive any place, that's when there's a tremendous amount of anxiety and, I think, depression, because that's their lifeline, and they have to depend on other people for transportation. Some people are just too proud, and they may retreat into their homes and not go out at all for that reason. That's the anxiety and the about dependency. But getting back to your point about what you were just saying, I'm sorry, I'm
Yeah, no, it was the ability to kind of move on and give up that dependence, and really the anxiety is overcome by experience.
Well, see, and I think one of the things that we may tend to do is, let's say when we lose our sight, and we used to be doing anything, anytime, and we think now we go all the way to what we call all or nothing thinking. We say, I can't do anything now.
Right. Yep.
And what we need to do oftentimes in dealing with our anxiety, which includes social phobia, is small doses. Take it little steps at a time until you develop the confidence to take bigger steps. And instead of going into all or nothing, I've got to be able to do this, and I'm going to, which can be very scary when you say, wait a minute, there's a party coming up. I have a lot of fear about being around people. You have to give yourself permission to just stay at the party for a short period of time, for as long as you can tolerate it. And then the next party, longer time. And that way, you increase your ability to adapt to a situation that you've been fearful of. But if you think you've got to go to a party and stay there, no matter what, for 3 hours, and you're aware of having social phobia, that's asking too much. That's unfair to you.
Yeah.
And so you need to titrate, to use the word titrate, the amount of exposure you give yourself in order to feel success, and then build on that. And that's one of the ways that we can deal with a lot of anxiety. Now, there's some anxiety which is trauma-related, and, with good justification, if you're put in a situation which starts to trigger some of those trauma reactions, then it's the trauma that has to be treated in order to calm the anxiety. And there are different ways that you can treat that. This is one of the issues for the vets returning from battle.
Yep.
They hear a car backfire and they think instantly,
that
duck.
PTSD. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
PTSD, anxiety, and maybe mixed with depression, but it certainly has got a basis of anxiety. When we have had unsuccessful experiences if we go back to social phobia, where we went someplace and they made fun of us,
Yeah.
then that reinforces never to go out again. But again,
Right.
you have to say, well, what was it in that particular thing that caused the problem? How can I avoid it? So it's kind of like using your intellect to take a look at what's scaring you and then working out what it is that you need to do to increase your comfortability with that level of discomfort.
Right. Well, there's a real quick, I want to make sure we're framing this. And if you're questioning whether or not you either may have anxiety or you're thinking about, well, am I an anxious person? I want to kind of run through 4 kind of elements that are symptoms of anxiety. And Bill, you feel free to jump in. But the general 4, you've got physical, emotional, cognitive, and behavioral. When you're looking at physical attributes or symptoms really of anxiety, now these are general speaking. These aren't like, if you have all of these, check all these. If you have one of them, then it's not it. These are just things to look out for. Physical, rapid heart rate or elevated heart rate, things like sweating, shortness of breath. If you get shaky or dizzy or tension, if you like really high tension in your back, in your neck, or just tension anywhere in your body. Anything you want to kind of add to that physical, Bill?
Yeah, I want to add on to that can be the stomach.
Okay.
Your stomach may get upset. As you say, dizziness.
Like a heaviness in my chest. I felt that personally, that feeling like there's an elephant sitting on your chest or there's something pushing on your chest.
That would be another way of putting it. Right. So in other words, there's a physiological reaction as well as a mental reaction.
Mm-hmm.
And
which
then,
in
of
those
course,
mental...
what we call Stinkin thinking about yourself.
Which are feelings of like fear, dread, irritability, difficulty concentrating. Kind of like what you were saying, a sense of impending doom.
Right. And you see, when you start, telling yourself that this is not going to work out, or nobody's going to like you, or why do you want to go out? All of those things, those are messages you're giving yourself that are unreal.
Right, which goes right into the third one of those cognitive symptoms. Are you having those racing thoughts? Are you having excessive worry about future events? Kind of like what I was talking about in the beginning. Are you overthinking things? Are you imagining worst case scenarios? I used to always say, I'm going to expect the worst, but hope for the best.
Right.
You know, and that's a very anxious place to come from. That's not super healthy.
No,
anything else to add to that one?
And I think the cognitive is really kind of the bottom line, because we have these fears. Sometimes we have trouble verbalizing them. And once we verbalize them to ourselves, if not to other people, then we begin to get some ownership and also find a way out. As my friend referred to, it's the loss of hope that can give us trouble. And one of the things is we lose hope without looking at the situation and say, is it really hopeless? See, that's the cognitive all or nothing thinking.
Yep.
There's no hope for me, so, why bother? And that's the kind of thinking that we can get into without realizing it.
Well, there's also I'm going to, like a stigma around anxiety, that it's this big, hairy, massive, scary thing, which it can be for a lot of people. However, I have seen and have heard people, and you can apply this to anxiety or depression or, the fighting between spouses, whatever thing you want to call it, but is actually giving it a name. So like, I don't know, Peter, Peter's coming out. I better go put Peter back in his box, or I better address Peter. Let me go talk to Peter for a second, and then I'll, it takes the scary word of anxiety and puts it into a manageable, physical, maybe tangible thing that you can address rather than letting it try to control you.
Yeah, I think that's the essential part. And see, some of the meditation techniques that we talked about a few sessions ago are ways to kind of calm that down.
Yeah.
As well as you say, naming Peter, but also taking some time out to meditate on Peter and kind of imagine, in a sense, Peter disappearing.
Yeah.
Or Peter becoming a friend rather than an enemy. But it's looking at that anxiety in a different way where you realize that you can control that, because you can. It just takes some work. And as I say, if we grew up in a home where there's a lot of anxiety and I know particularly in homes where there are children with disabilities, the parents may be really afraid of you getting out and doing anything.
Yeah.
And they instill that fear in you. That makes
Absolutely
things a little more problematic for you to get past.
Well, here's what I've noticed about anxiety, and when I watched, I don't know if you've seen it, but Inside Out 2, it's this cartoon or animated film about internal emotions and how they kind of take over our body and how they behave in our body, and it's a very, very cute, very poignant movie. But what I noticed was really interesting is that anxiety doesn't necessarily come in like a sledgehammer and just destroy your life. It really starts out with a question, a thought of, oh, can I really go upstairs? And then it's like, then you once you answer that question in the negative, that's where the anxiety is born. And then you're like, well, maybe I can't go up the stairs. Maybe if I'm stuck down here in the basement and I can't go up the stairs, I'm never going to be able to eat again. If I never eat again, then I'm going to die. And surely then if I die, my kids aren't going to, and then you spiral so far out of control that everything is revolving around that one thought of, oh, I can't get up the stairs. Well, what if, you were talking about just talking to anxiety and talking to quote unquote Peter. Can you imagine how powerful we would become if we coached this thing, anxiety, into a place of love and grace, where if we were talking to, like Bill, let's say I was anxiety and you were yourself. If you came to me and you were coaching me anxiety, look, I understand how you're feeling. And right now you're making me feel a certain way, and we need to work as a team. How do we do this together? And then you coach me, or anxiety, into a place of joy and of helpfulness and fruitfulness that becomes so overwhelming that people are like, wow, this is awesome. Who are you?
Exactly.
How much more awesome would our world be?
And we can talk about the rewards of doing whatever it is that we're afraid of doing. The reward at the end of this scary journey. And when we understand that, then or we have something that we're really searching for that makes it easier for you and Peter to say, okay, how do we get that reward?
Yeah.
And to work together. But at times we are so used to shutting down, and that's where the danger is. We shut down and we don't do the work with Peter. We don't, we say, oh, I can't get up the stairs, when indeed you say, why do I think that? What is it that keeps me from trying one step at a time?
That's exactly right.
And make it, just try it this way, see what happens. And then the more that we succeed, the success builds on success.
Yeah. Well, there's a book, Bill, that I want to recommend to our readers, and I've recommended it a few times, but the 4-8 principle, it really takes advantage of that stinkin' thinking and changes it and puts it upside down. And it's really taking a look at how to capture those thoughts, to listen to them, to look at them, and then to change the rhetoric of it.
Right.
And, in today's day and age, we're all about changing the rhetoric of whatever it is that's going on, especially with the election coming around. There's a lot of anxious people. There's a lot of anxious stuff. Kids are anxious at school because they don't know if they're going to walk into school and a gunman's going to come through and shoot up the school. There's kids who don't know if they're going to go home and their parents are going to be abusive. There's a wife that doesn't know that her husband is having an affair. And there's so many things in this world that are causing anxious thoughts, and to be able to take them captive and take control of them and to address them head on will set people free.
And this is where writing these fears down is very helpful, because somehow when you see it on paper, sometimes you might even laugh. But you see, it's when the anxiety is floating around in our head and we can't capture it. Mm-hmm. But if we put it down on paper and then begin to look at the things that we're so afraid of, then it begins to become more manageable. It does. Because we put a name to it. As you say, Peter is one way of doing it. Another is just naming the anxiety and put it, I'm afraid that this is going to happen if I go to this party. Yeah. So I won't go. And
you can,
or I'm going to become dependent. And if you really want to do a job on yourself, put down the if this happens, then this is going to happen kind of thing. And then you begin to see how ludicrous it is.
That's right.
And how we tend to, in our mind, dramatize. And we need to control that piece of drama. We're not writing a play. We're writing about our life. And we're writing it with a happy ending.
That's right. Absolutely. And it's, next week we're going to be talking about anxiety part 2, and it's really going to be about the solutions and how to tackle anxiety. And this week we're trying to name it. We're trying to define it. We're trying to understand where it comes from. And I think next week we'll give you a lot of tools to be able to tackle anxiety, to address it, to face it head on, or to conquer it, whatever word you want to put in there. It's going to be really important. So if you have questions, we want to answer them. And this is going to go right into our live show that we're doing on October 23rd. And I am so excited about this. So we'll join on Facebook and YouTube. But if you have questions, give us a call at 720-712-8856 or email us at feedback@aftersight.org, and we'll get that question answered, because everybody has an anxiety thought, an anxious thought.
Yeah,
and we don't want that to get...
I went back
we don't want to get thrown under the rug.
Caveman, Pardon?
Yeah. We just don't want it to get thrown under the rug. We want to address everything head on with you.
You got it. Okay. This has been Blindsight with Bill Lundgren and Jonathan Price. Delighted to have you with us. Hope this has been helpful for you. Look forward to connecting with you again. Thank you.